Hey everybody, I want to welcome you to the new episode of the Purtee Show. This week is Fred Van Lente, great guest. He writes for Archer and Armstrong for Valiant Comics, and he's going to be taking over, I believe, Magnus, the robot fighter. It used to be part of Valiant Comics, now it's part of Dynamite. He's also done Marvel Zombies, best known for writing Cowboys and Aliens. Had a great little talk, and his cat decided to try and attack me or the computer. I'm not exactly sure which direction it was going, but overall it was a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed the interview. So without further ado, here's Fred Van Lente. I hope you all have a good week. Yeah, we'll go with a good week. Fred Van Lente, thank you so much. After trials and tribulations and people slamming me in the back of my car, here we are.
Right. Well, I'm glad you're all right, and I'm happy to be here.
First off, I gotta say, love Archer and Armstrong. It's by far, if I had to make a list of my top 5 favorite books this year, that would be right on there.
Why not? Everyone else is. Thank you so much. We have a huge amount of fun doing it.
Now, I noticed that the book is very social and political and things of that nature, and I did have someone ask me to ask you this.
Sure.
To which way do you lean?
Only my tailor gets to ask me that.
Hey now!
I like to think of myself as a militant moderate. I mean, I definitely am not a conservative, and I never vote that way, but I tend to always go for the middle, because I find that's where the truth is, and the extremes tend to distort their case to score points, and I prefer to cleave through the bullshit and just try and get as close to the truth as I possibly can.
Well said, very well said. And I noticed behind you on the bookshelf, is that the mask that the?
It is. Good eye. If you might want to link it to it on the website, but these guys did wonderful. They're doing a fan film series of Archer and Armstrong, and the 1%, who are bad guys in Archer and Armstrong, show up there, and they very nicely at New York Comic Con gave me the bull mask.
Nice.
And they also have bear masks. I tried putting it on, but it smells like old mask, and then the strap broke. But that's yeah,
cool.
If you go to fredvanlente.com, the video is embedded on the webpage. It's super fun.
I saw that.
Of them. Yeah, they're doing a bunch from Movember, and they're planning on doing more. So it's semi-sanctioned by Valiant, which is really cool. And Valiant has great outreach to the fans, and that's part of that.
I've noticed that, and I love how Valiant has this big universe that everybody's a part of. Whereas you have the big two, it kind of someone could like for example, the book Uncanny Avengers is completely separate from anything else that's going on in the Marvel Universe.
Okay.
But it has all of the major players.
Right.
So it doesn't make any sense. But here it's like, you had the Harbinger Wars and things like that. And from what I understand, at some point, Quantum and Woody are going to be crossing over with Archer and Armstrong?
Well, that's sort of the obvious get, just because they're both comedy buddy series. But what's happening first is beginning in Archer and Armstrong 18. We're actually crossing over with Bloodshot and Hardcore.
Ooh.
And that's a actual formal crossover, and that, part 1 is in Archer Armstrong, part 2 is in Bloodshot and the Hardcore, part 3 is in Archer Armstrong, part 4 is in Bloodshot. So I'm excited, because I don't think I've ever done that. And I'm working with my buddies Christos Gage and Josh Dysart to do that, and it's super exciting.
That's fantastic.
Sorry I'm getting my James Bond villain on here.
No, that's quite all right.
He leapt up. It's easier to let him do what he wants, for the most part. Until he jumps on the computer, in which case he'll have to be expelled from the interview.
That's totally okay, Mr. Pleasance.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I'm going to give you a little background.
Sure.
What got you first into comics in general? Not just writing comics, but comics in general. Do you remember what your first book was?
Yeah, my dad was a casual comics fan, and he... some friends got him the book version of Jules Feiffer's Great Comic Heroes, which is a book that came out in the 60s. Feiffer's a very famous cartoonist, obviously. He started out working for Will Eisner's studio doing comics, doing The Spirit. And so Pfeiffer wrote this essay for the New Yorker. They then put it into a book with a bunch of origins of various Golden Age heroes. So Captain America and Superman and Batman and Human Torch and Submariner and Hawkman and Green Lantern, all those Golden Age characters, and so they were all in one book, and I loved it so much, and so I sort of inherited it after I was born, and I loved it so much, and I tried to get my mom to read them to me, which she did, but I wanted her to read them to me so much, she finally got fed up and stopped and refused to do it. So I just sort of stared at the pages until I figured out the words, So I was able to read much earlier, than other kids my age, when I was 4 or something like that, thanks to comics. So they've definitely been a part of my life, literally from sort of my earliest memories.
Well, that's great. I don't remember the guy's name right now, but the guy who wrote the book saying that comics were bad. I forget his name.
Fredric Wertham.
Yes, he's full of shit. So there you go. I'm sorry if the cat's ear can't hear those kind of words.
I love the fact that you have these.
Wow. There you go.
So Annie knocked the mask over. Okay.
You were saying
that's new to everybody.
Yeah. You were saying you.
And he likes to do that a lot. Yes, Wertham. Yeah, it's a very unpopular opinion you have there that Wertham was full of shit. I'm going to start saying Wertham was right, and that comics are rot your mind and give you all sorts of terrible ideas, and they should be banned just to be an iconoclast.
All I know is that the first comic I got had Rogue in a very skimpy outfit on it. So I think I have to thank the X-Men for that, but that's...
And it inspired a million convention sketches, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. Oh, merciful heavens. Yeah, it was the start of the Muir Island saga, if you remember that. That's when Xavier was still walking again, and then it was against the Shadow King, and they...
Not dead, walking.
Yeah, not dead, just he was walking, and it was against the Shadow King, and he had the X-Men under his control, so X-Factor had to come in, and... bunch of crap. But since we're on Marvel for a second, how awesome was it writing Marvel Zombies?
Oh, it was super fun. Yeah, I mean, I've done more Marvel Zombies than anybody else, which seems insane. I mean, they sort of gave it to me just because I was good with humor, and the corporate suits were not letting them at the time use Spider-Man or the X-Men or any of the major characters, so I kind of got stuck with villains and
Werewolf by Night.
And Werewolf by Night, exactly. I love Werewolf by Night.
Yeah.
So yes, that's sort of where the whole idea of putting Machine Man in there sort of came from, was so they wouldn't let us use Spider-Man, or they didn't want Timmy, writing in asking why Aunt May is getting her face eaten off. That
would have been awesome.
Well, sold books, but I guess they were kind of looking to the long game. And then, for some reason, they decided, I think it was between Zombies 4 and 5, I think, they let us do Marvel Zombies Return, which was sort of a sequel to what Kirkman was doing. And then they let us use Iron Man and Hulk and everybody, but I don't know why. Then they went back to not letting us use any of the main characters, so... Yeah. Your guess is as good as mine.
I'm going to not try and guess what a corporate guy is thinking.
Yeah.
That's probably for the best. Now, when it comes to inspiration for writing, who was your first? Who really made you want to take the pen and put it to paper and write comics?
Well, the first writer that I really sort of became aware of and really started collecting quite a lot was Steve Gerber. I loved his Guardians of the Galaxy. Actually, last night, for the first time, I was at a signing here in Long Island, and I met for the first time Al Milgrom, who's a terrific writer, artist, editor, inker. And he did Guardians of the Galaxy with Gerber. And I loved that stuff. And I loved his Defenders and Man-Thing, of course. I collected all those. Howard the Duck, I collected all of those. You might be able to see the Howard the Duck and Man-Thing to buy over there.
Yeah. There's comics over there. I would have had no idea you actually read comics.
I know, right? I try to hide it, because I hear comics are for nerds.
That's what I hear, too.
I don't I don't want the girls at school to make fun of me. But yeah, so it was really Gerber first. I loved the Avengers. I loved I loved the Roy Thomas Avengers especially. I really liked the Jim Shooter, George Perez Avengers. And then John Byrne took over after that. I really loved Alpha Flight. I sort of when I was into superheroes, and I loved the Marvel stuff because in addition to great comic book heroes, in the 70s when I was growing up, the Pocket Books produced Amazing Spider-Man, Incredible Hulk, and Fantastic Four, and they reprinted a lot of the early Ditko, Kirby, Lee Marvels as paperback, so I devoured those. So when I was into superheroes, those were definitely what I was into.
That's awesome. That's great to hear somebody else loving Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm really excited for that film. And I can't believe that Glenn Close is playing Nova Prime.
It's a eclectic cast.
Very much so. Very much so. Now, when it comes to Archer and Armstrong, what is it? Did Valiant contact you, or did you try and get the job, or?
Valiant came to me at New York Comic Con and asked me if I wanted to write Archer and Armstrong. I said sure, and then I went home and I had to Google Archer and Armstrong because I had no idea what it was. Ironically, I did a book at Marvel with Greg Pak called Incredible Hercules. And as I found out later, Tom Brevoort, who's executive editor over there, told me later, after our Archer and Armstrong had come out, that when they were talking about doing Incredible Hercules at Marvel, which is a buddy book between the mismatched pair of Hercules and Amadeus Cho, a Korean teen genius, Tom said, "Oh, great, yeah, we'll do that. It'll be like Archer and Armstrong," because he was a big Archer and Armstrong fan. And I'd never heard of Archer and Armstrong. Valiant, of course, approached me to Archer and Armstrong because I had done Incredible Hercules. So it was this weird kind of karmic wheel turning circle of life kind of thing.
So you were writing it before you knew you were writing it?
Apparently. There's some significant differences between Archer and Armstrong and Incredible Hercules, but
right.
I thought it was pretty funny. But that's how that all turned out.
And I do love the back and forth between Archer and Armstrong about, especially in the early books, about whether or not there's a god.
Right.
That is just some hilarious stuff. I can't. I think the best way for if someone's an atheist or a Christian or whatever they want to be, the one way that they can explain themselves to people is the one line that she says to Archer as she's dying about how to be a true believer there has to be doubt.
Right.
And that's
Sister Tommy,
yeah,
who's one of Armstrong's allies, who's this kind of kick-ass nun who we fought in World War II with.
I just love when he's just throwing out these names, like, Emily Dickinson. Nothing, whatever. Yeah, she's just...
Exactly, yeah. Armstrong's a fun character because he spent his whole life wanting to be a poet, so he's met and befriended all these poets, modern and ancient, and so he's a lover, he's a poet, he's a lover of fine alcohols. What he isn't too much is a fighter, and that's where sort of Archer comes in. I just like the idea where the super strong guy doesn't want to fight. I just think it's a literary conceit I really like.
Now, Ivar just came back.
Right.
How long is he gonna be with the duo for a while, or is this just for the storyline, or?
Ivar is so for people who don't read Valiant or have never read Valiant.
What's wrong with you?
Armstrong, I know. Number one, what's wrong with you, and get off this podcast. No, don't stay.
Wait.
Armstrong has two brothers. Armstrong, there's three immortal brothers in the Valiant universe. One is Armstrong, who's super strong. One is the Eternal Warrior, Gilad, who is super badass. And one is Ivar, the Time Walker, who's super smart. Technically, in our version of the Valiant universe, Ivar is not immortal, but I don't want to confuse people. And Ivar's figured out how to travel through time. And so recently in the book, Ivar and Armstrong, who had not seen each other for centuries, are finally reunited. They go on a drinking tour through history and get super hammered. That was issue 15. And at the end of that, Ivar, for reasons that we don't want to get too spoilery, kind of walks off into the snowstorm and leaves Armstrong. Not to get too spoilery, but he'll be back, but maybe not for a little while. But there are definitely plans for him.
And then one last thing, not to get too spoilery, what can we expect from the crossover between Archer and Armstrong and Bloodshot?
Well, that flows out of Archer number 0, which is coming up fairly soon, I think in 2 months, which is basically one of the themes of the series has been that Archer is a Psyot kid, like from Harbinger, and has some deep connection to Project Rising Spirit, which are the people who created Bloodshot, who's this kind of nanomachine-filled assassin. And we're going to get very specific and very explicit about that connection, and it's that connection that the conflict between Archer Armstrong and Bloodshot and the Hardcore comes from.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And folks can follow you on Twitter.
They may.
At
this is my name, Fred Van Lente.
Yep, and FredVanLente.com. You can see that Archer and Armstrong video.
Yes.
Which is awesome. And be sure to pick up Archer and Armstrong. I'm behind on everything. I just caught up last night. 15's not out yet, is it?
15 came out last month. 16 comes out the Wednesday after we're taping this. So you're off by one.
Okay, so now I have to hit up Comixology and rock this out. So yes, so go to your local comic book store, talk to the nerd behind the counter, tell him you want to read Archer and Armstrong. Fred, it's been a blast. We'll have to have you back soon.
Thank you so much, Ron.
All right.